On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the basic snare drum stroke, which can also be further generalized as a basic percussion stroke. There's just a few basic supplies that we'll need for today's podcast. Probably the first and most important will be a good pair of concert snare drum sticks. Concert snare drum sticks are typically smaller than your average marching stick, and they're typically a little bit larger than your average drum set stick. When you're selecting your stick, you want to make sure that there's no nicks or chips in the tip of the stick especially. That will have pretty bad results with your overall sound quality. Typically speaking, concert snare drum sticks will fall somewhere around 16 inches in length and about half an inch, maybe just a little bit more in diameter. You also need a practice pad. Really, there's no sense in going all out and playing so loud on a snare drum, especially when we're just learning technique things. And finally, you'll also need a metronome. If there's one thing that's important for percussionists to learn, it's a really good sense of time and pulse, and a metronome is an excellent way to develop this. You want to adjust your practice pad so that's roughly at belt level. Arms should be slightly bent downward if it's done correctly. Your stance needs to be relaxed, so this means keeping your feet about shoulder width apart. There's that word, relax. It's probably the most important word in percussion, because if you can't play relaxed, you probably aren't going to get a good sound, and you may even cause some muscle damage over time. So, every time I want you to think about playing and being relaxed, I'm going to show you a little picture of Holly Johnson, former frontman of Frankie Goes to Hollywood. The basic mechanics of a snare drum stroke are like dribbling a ball. Even though I may use my whole arm, everything begins and ends in my wrist. I can section my arm off into three distinct groups: the arm, the wrist, and the fingers. Each of these is important to the overall technique. However, the core of the technique must lie in the wrist. From a solid technical foundation in the wrist, the performer can use the fingers and the arms to augment the technical demands of the music, whether that's fast or slow playing, or whether that's loud or soft playing. Of course, whole arm integration is what will ultimately allow the player to play relaxed, but the wrist must remain at the center of the technique. This is what we will develop first. To give you an idea of the basic hand position, I want you to hold your wrist sort of limp like this, like you're begging for food. Now, staying 100% relaxed, I want you to bend up at your wrist. And what do you notice? Hopefully you do notice that your fingers naturally want to curl, okay? This is something millions of years of evolution has done to the human anatomy, and this is something we as drummers don't want to fight. You'll be placing the fulcrum approximately 1/3 from the base of the stick. Putting your hand back in that naturally relaxed position we just talked about. Place the stick so that it comes in contact with the fleshy part of your thumb, the first knuckle of your index finger, and between the first and second knuckles of your middle finger. That'll be our fulcrum. You should notice too that your ring finger and your pinky finger are nice and naturally relaxed around the stick, always in contact. Now that we've figured out how to do the grip, it's time to set up and play. Bring your arms down by your sides and bring your sticks up so that the backs of your hands face the ceiling and the tips of your sticks rest on the practice pad. You should notice that your sticks form between a 60 and 90 degree angle. Try that again. From this position, using your wrists only, going to lift the tips so that they're about 9 inches above the practice pad. This is going to be our starting position. Remember to always keep your arms, fingers, and your wrists relaxed. The first stroke that we're going to learn is called the full stroke, or the piston stroke. And that's because the stick travels from this upper plane down to the practice pad and back up to this upper plane in one motion, only using the natural rebound of the stick. Just to give you a demonstration. You'll notice it is not two strokes. It is not a down followed by an up. one stroke. The stick must travel as quick and as naturally as it can from plane to plane. The keys are to not lift it, to not force it, and to relax. Our first exercise will be a simple 8 on the hand exercise, meaning I will place 8 strokes with my right hand, followed by 8 strokes with my left hand, and repeat. Okay, so I'm going to set my metronome at quarter note equals 80. That's a good middle of the road tempo. Get in my position. Again, I'm concentrating on being relaxed. I'm concentrating on the sticks, returning to that same starting point in one motion. One other exercise I'd like to share with you comes from Joe Morello's book, Master Studies, and it's called Table of Time. And this is a great exercise because it actually kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It allows the player to focus on technique as well as to really understand various subdivisions. Even if your 6th grader gets kind of freaked out with quintuplets and triplets, and frankly don't we all, they can most likely understand the concept of notes evenly divided into 3s and 5s, if they understand the concept of notes being subdivided into 2s and 4s. And really, it doesn't need to be any more difficult than that. The goal is to get them to feel what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on feel like against a steady pulse. For this exercise, you'll want to put your metronome on quarter note equals 50. The first thing that we're going to work on is transitioning from 1s to 2s. So if I'm thinking a 4/4 measure, I'm going to play 1 measure of 1 followed by 1 measure of 2s in my right hand, and then repeat and play the same thing in my left hand. Focus on good technique, staying relaxed. Subdivide those rhythms before you play them. So once you feel comfortable transitioning from 1s to 2s, the next step is to work on transitioning from 2s to 3s. And of course, once that feels comfortable, you can go back and add 1s to the mix, so that you'll be doing 1, 2s, and 3s up and down in both your right hand and your left hand. Of course, as you're doing these exercises, always be watching your technique and make sure that your full stroke hasn't become a down and an up stroke. Okay, so that's a down and up versus a full stroke. Hopefully you can see the difference. So just to demonstrate for you this 1s, 2s, and 3s, go and play ahead and play it for you. Transitioning to the left hand. Transitioning back to the right hand. So far, we've been developing the wrist separately. Of course, drumming involves the use of both hands, and there's going to be a certain point you can't play any faster with one hand and stay relaxed. So I want you to take that same table of time and practice going hand to hand. What you want to watch out for, however, is that you change from this full stroke technique to the down up technique the faster you go. Make sure you still have that good full stroke technique. Using a mirror can be a very, very helpful aid in this. So what I'm going to do for you is play 1s to 6s and back at quarter note equals 50. Remember to always be looking out for that full stroke. Stay relaxed. Let each stick return. not, but. Think ahead to the next rhythm. The last step with this exercise is to juggle the numbers so that you're playing them out of order, since music ever rarely moves sequentially as we've been practicing. So what I've done here is put those 6 numbers we've been dealing with in this hat, and I'm going to draw them out and hopefully play for you the order in which they are picked. So we have a 3, 6, 2, 5, ooh, this will be a fun one, 4, and then finally 1. Alright, so I'm going to attempt to play 3, 6, 2, 5, 4, 1.